Welcome. This is our monthly meeting of the Sperry Galligar Audubon Society. This is your first time. We especially welcome you. Of course, this is free and open to the public, and everybody's welcome. And we're so glad you're here. Although we are a membership organization, and one thing you can do to support the Audubon Society is to join and you go see Wayne if you want to join. And you can join on PayPal now as well. And we're also a chapter of the National Audubon Society. And we meet the last Thursday of every month during the school year, so during the academic year. So with guest speakers typically. So one thing that we haven't been doing lately, but I'll do this week. Has anybody been seeing any interesting birds lately? New things showing up. So we're in the lot. For those of you who are birders, most of us aren't actually birders, but this is late winter. Things are starting to change a little bit, and some new migrants are starting to come through and show up.
Cormorants.
Now.
Cormorant.
Cormorant. Double-crested cormorants. Okay. Okay. You guys are good. Anybody else?
I'll tell you what, I have an interesting question somebody in the house might be able to answer. We do have a couple of feeders out and a couple of bowls of water that we leave out. And the last few days, I've noticed I think it's a small bird that flies with a pretty pointed wing formation, but when it gets on our patio next to the bowls, it's flattening its wings out on the pavement. Now, is it an unusual injured bird that can't fold its wings up, or is it is that just a different type of bird?
Anybody want to?
One day it did it when it was windy, but now I've seen it 3 days in a row. And it always gets around the bird. It can't perch up on the edge of the dish. It tries to, but it's got its wings out flat and behind it. Nobody knows.
Anybody know?
Sure, it's a bird.
Yeah. No, it's not a plane.
Do you know what kind it is?
No, I don't. I have to watch it. It had a lot of stripe markings on its wings and so it might just be an injured bird.
It could be.
Knows about our yard.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
It warms up its wings that way, right?
It could be. Some birds do that. Some birds clean themselves that way. They do dust baths. We've noticed some turkey vultures have come back early this year. There's been turkey vultures back for several weeks now. We've seen black vultures on our campus now several times this spring. Phoebes are around. They didn't
I see
really
American kestrels, but I don't know if they're here all winter long.
American kestrels, yeah, they're here all year. They're here year round, but they're more common in the winter.
I heard the American woodcock.
Woodcock, yeah, and they were just saying that they had woodcock, so the woodcock have started their displays.
I've noticed I don't see the small downy woodpeckers anymore, not for the last 2-3 years. I haven't seen them out at my place in Weir. I see the bigger woodpeckers, and they're out. They've been here all along. I don't know, did they not go anywhere this winter, or?
There's woodpeckers here year round, so maybe some locally.
I'm just the opposite in Missouri. I see downy woodpeckers everywhere, and every 50 to 1's a heron.
Oh.
Well, this year seems to be really reduced numbers in our yard, in our feeders. I mean, like like a third to a quarter what we had last year.
Maybe since it's been milder, they've been not relying on feeders as much.
Yeah.
That would be my guess. Okay. Before I introduce our speaker, any announcements? This is a couple months out. Like Greenbush is doing an outreach event on April 25th that we're going to be part of. A bird walk. There'll be a bird walk, and there might be some bird banding. We don't know yet, but Sperry Galligar and maybe the Wildlife Club will be helping with that. And any other announcements? I think so.
I'll announce myself.
Oh, you'll announce yourself. Okay, Megan's going to introduce herself.
Okay, hi. Is this microphone working? Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Can I put it higher or lower? Okay, great. So, yes, you were supposed to hear Dr. Pennington talk about turtles tonight, and you're not going to because he had a Thursday night class scheduled at the last minute. So, I could have scrambled to find some quickly and have them let me know, but instead I decided y'all are just gonna be stuck with me. I am Megan Corrigan. I'm the Vice President of Sperry, Galligar, Audubon, and I am an amateur naturalist enthusiast, okay? So none of this research is mine. I did not see these dinosaurs. I did not dig up fossils, but I am going to tell you what other people have done. And I'm really excited that you're here because I want to start with the title, okay, how birds became dinosaurs. That might sound like that's stupid. Birds didn't become dinosaurs. But let me just start by asking, how many of you learned in school that dinosaurs were great, big, extinct, cold-blooded reptiles, extinct and gone? How many learned that in school? Oh, okay, a lot of people. You too, you're young. Oh, how many people learned in school that birds evolved from dinosaurs? How many people learned that in school? Okay, so we got 1, 2, 3. We got some people here who learned that birds evolved from dinosaurs in school.
Not in grade school.
Right, not grade school, right? This was already grad school, but okay. And how many people learned in school that birds are dinosaurs? 1 learned in school. 2 learned in school that birds are dinosaurs. So we look at the evidence. They were not dinosaurs when I was in 5th grade. Now kids are learning they're dinosaurs. We've got Neil deGrasse Tyson. We've got Sir David Attenborough telling me on television that birds are dinosaurs. I've got an 8-year-old nephew who has a book called The Truth About Dinosaurs, and the first page has a picture of a chicken, and it says, "You're not supposed to be there." And he says, "Yes, I am. I'm a dinosaur." Like, this is for 8-year-olds. So the general, the way things are going is that birds are dinosaurs. But how did we get there? How did we start when birds were definitely not dinosaurs and get to that they are? That's what we're going to talk about today. And most of what I'm going to talk about today came from, we just jumped forth a whole bunch of, go back. All right, we'll start back here. Okay. Hey, slideshow, go back. All right. Okay, most of what I'm going to talk about today, that this doesn't want to go to, is, why is it not connecting? Came from a show, here we go, now let's try. Came from a show that I saw on Nova, on public television last year called Dino Birds. And this program, if you have a Passport subscription, you can go home and watch it, and you'll understand better everything I'm going to talk about. But it comes at things with the assumption that birds are dinosaurs. So this is not news, but it does talk about the recent discoveries that support this theory. All right, so we'll start back in my 5th grade class when we had these little plastic dinosaurs. Which ones do you recognize?
The one in the middle.
What's the one in the middle?
Brontosaurus.
The Brontosaurus?
Right, and that's right.
T-Rex.
We're doing 5th grade. We're doing 5th grade dinosaurs. Oh, man. We're doing 5th grade dinosaurs.
Back then, they were dinosaurs, it's something different now.
Yeah, now they are Apatosaurus. Is that right, Cindy? Okay, so they were Brontosaurus. We all remember Brontosaurus. What else do you recognize from 5th grade? Triceratops. What else?
Stegosaurus.
Stegosaurus. Yes.
And
Did anybody sing the song? My name is Stegosaurus. I'm a funny looking dinosaur.
T-Rex.
T-Rex. Okay, we got a T-Rex up there. What else?
Pterodactyl.
A pterodactyl. All right, so given those, is there anything else? Okay, given those, and given the fact that now we've got Sir David Attenborough telling us that birds are dinosaurs, logically, which of these dinosaurs turned into a bird? Pterodactyl, right? Totally logical. I can see that. It grew feathers, it became a bird. That is not what the science says. In fact, poor little pterodactyl is not even, it's like Pluto is not a planet anymore. Pterodactyls are not even dinosaurs anymore. And maybe they never were, but in my 5th grade class, they were definitely dinosaurs. So they are a non-dinosaurian reptile. And the mosasaurs, like Kansas, look, it's got "saur" in the name, mosasaurs. And they must be dinosaurs. No, they are aquatic reptiles. They are not dinosaurs. So then we come to the question of, okay, well, what makes a dinosaur if it's not just that it lived a zillion years ago and there are fossils of it? And the answer is in the hips. Shakira said, the hips never lie. Dinosaurs have tight upright hips. Other reptiles have kind of splayed out back hips. This that I'm showing you up here is called a phylogenetic tree. And the intention of it is to show when different lineages, different families broke off from a common ancestor. So there was a common ancestor that broke off into the reptiles, that broke off into the crocodiles, that broke off into those pterodactyls that we like, and then they broke off into the dinosaurs. And there's 3 groups of dinosaurs. The ones that we're going to look at tonight that became the birds are the theropods. So, starting with these hips, we've got reptiles, we've all seen lizards, we've seen crocodiles, their hips are out like this. They kind of like can lay down and bask in the sun, right? I also learned in 5th grade that they were cold-blooded. They're not cold-blooded anymore, they are ectotherms, which means that they get their heat from the environment, which is a nice thing. They don't have to spend energy to stand up straight to get their heat. They can just lay there and absorb the heat. They don't have, because they are ectotherms, they do not have a whole lot of extra energy to expend on sustained activity. They don't need to eat all that much. They can just kind of hang out and absorb the sun. Dinosaurs, on the other hand, have very tight hips. They're meant to be upright, and the hips are tight. And this dinosaurs broke off from a crown group called archosaurs. 250 million years ago, there were dinosaurs called archosaurs. And those archosaurs split into, you can see here, they split into the crocodiles, the pterosaurs, and the 3 groups of dinosaurs. Make sense so far? This is the paleontological accepted scientific consensus right now. You have the archosaur, it split into the crocodiles, it split into the dinosaurs, and then from the dinosaurs evolved the older birds and the modern birds. So we're going to look at these theropods, and the earliest theropods were found 230 million years ago. Because we are going to talk about years, like 230 million years ago, I'm going to give you a timeline, but first, what makes a theropod? Theropods are 2-legged dinosaurs. Theropods have hollow bones, and they are mostly carnivores. So up until the mostly carnivores, the birds are 2-legged and they have hollow bones. There's definitely connections. And then the theropods have lots of teeth. And they were dominant. They were a dominant species right up until the asteroid. So we're going to look at 2 timelines tonight. We're going to look at how birds became dinosaurs and how dinosaurs became birds. We'll start with how dinosaurs became birds. So the theropod timeline, the first fossils that have been found are 230 million years old from the Triassic. And they are small, bipedal carnivores, 2 feet. Then we get into the Jurassic, 200 million years ago, and there's a lot more of them. They're more diverse. Some of them have evolved back to have 4 feet. Some of them are still on 2 feet. And they're both avian and non-avian dinosaurs from the Jurassic period. And then we get the Cretaceous, which is where we are able to find so many specimens. Cretaceous was up until the asteroid. More than 500 species of theropods have been described, including Tyrannosaurus, our friend, and Velociraptor. So that's the timeline of the dinosaurs becoming birds, to a point. The science timeline starts in about, just for, so that we feel really important, humans, 2 million years. Yeah, just to keep us in line. Okay, so the science, within our 2 million years though, we're doing pretty well. The scientific timeline started in the 1820s when Western science determined that these great big bones were reptiles, extinct giant reptiles. Not that dinosaur bones and fossils had not been found before. They were found before. They were found in China. They said they were dragon bones. Native Americans said they were gods. Other cultures said they were monsters. So humankind was aware that these fossils and these animals existed, but the first time they were described as reptiles was 1820s. In the 1860s, in Germany was where this started. They found small theropod fossils. They did not know at the time that these were theropod fossils, because I don't think they quite have theropods yet, but they found small fossils in the 1860s that started to explain a lot more about theropods. In the 1970s, and this is kind of a spoiler and a guide to what we're going to see tonight, 1970s, everything turned on its head because a paper came out that said that the theropods were actually warm-blooded, endotherms. And in the 1990s, in China, they found some sites from a volcano with feathers. All of this leading up to it becomes more and more likely that dinosaurs could be birds. And in the 2000s, they were finally able to apply molecular data. They don't have DNA, but they have proteins. And that also suggests that birds are living dinosaurs. Okay, so we're going to talk a lot about the fossil record. And the most important thing to keep in mind about the fossil record is it's like puzzle pieces. You find a fossil, and that's very exciting, but if you don't know where it fits in with the organisms that came before and after, you can't do that much about it. And it's very rare that an animal dies and turns into a fossil. Usually, animals die and they get eaten or they decompose. That's probably what's going to happen to all of us. We are unlikely to become a fossil. But yet, there are times and situations in which these fossils occur, like the La Brea tar pits. They fell into the tar pit, nothing could eat them, now they're beautiful fossils. The volcanic eruptions created lots of fossils. Okay. Now, so you usually find a fossil and you're like, oh, that's nice, okay, this is a fossil. But sometimes you find a fossil and you know that you found something really important. And that's what happened in 1860 in Germany. They found this fossil of an Archaeopteryx. It was the first fossil they found that had feathers. So they assumed this was the first bird. Very exciting. I mean, it looks like a bird. Look, it has wings. It has feathers. Okay, it has a really long, bony tail. That's really not a bird. And if you can't see it here, but as they studied it farther, it had teeth, which is not really a bird thing. And this fossil, because they know from the rocks around it that this fossil was created about 150 million years ago. So 150 million years ago, there were feathers, and there were things with feathers that look like they must have been flying around. They call these fossils transitional fossils when they find them that bridge the gap. So they said this one is half bird, half dinosaur, a half reptile. Is it a reptile, is it a dinosaur with bird features or a bird with dinosaur features? That's still to be determined, but at that time they knew that this was going to be one of the missing links. But it's really hard to determine when things are an N of 1. Also, remember that at this time in 1860, dinosaurs were giant extinct reptiles. These fossils that they found were like, 3 feet, 4 feet long. They were not giant. So nobody at that time would have even said these are necessarily dinosaurs. That was a little later. At the same time that they found Archaeopteryx, in the same place, they found a fossil called Compsognathus. And it does not have wings. It was described by scientists at the time as a very curious lizard. Again, it just didn't fit into their paradigm of dinosaurs, these great big huge things. So it was a lizard. So they've got these two fossils now. And later on, they understood it was a theropod. But they've got these two fossils, one for this small little, there's the size of a turkey. They say that the Compsognathus was maybe as tall as a wild turkey. And they're looking at these two fossils together. And I look at these two fossils together and I'm like, yep, one is definitely a bird and one is not. They don't look too similar to me. I think they look kind of different. But there was a visionary guy named Thomas Henry Huxley, who looked at those two fossils and said, hey, they both are walking around on two legs. They both have long arms. They both have a long bony tail, and they both have teeth. Thomas Henry Huxley, this happened 2 years after Darwin's On the Origin of Species was published. Most scientists were not jumping on board the evolution bandwagon. Most scientists still thought Darwin maybe was a couple sandwiches short of a picnic, and that was a lovely idea, but things don't change like that. Thomas Henry Huxley bought into it fully. He was known as Darwin's bulldog. He would go out to public debates and defend the theory of evolution. So he saw these fossils and he said, this is definitely the same creature that he is arguing that birds are dinosaurs way back in 1868. 1868, 100 years before I was even born, that they're talking about birds were dinosaurs. But for 100 years, nobody accepted that argument, and there were several lines of reasoning, but one main line of reasoning had to do with no dinosaur that had been found had a wishbone, and all birds had wishbones. All right, so meanwhile, Kansas, 1860s. What's going on in Kansas in 1860s? Civil War, what else?
Statehood.
Statehood, we became a state. Yeah, what's happening in western Kansas? You got a lot of people running around. What are they doing? Finding fossils. This was a fantastic time for Kansas to find fossils. And why are there fossils in Kansas? Why are there mosasaurs in Kansas? What was going on in Kansas during the Cretaceous, right before that asteroid? Yes, that's right. Here we go. Let's try and get this to work. Okay. Yes, the inland sea. An inland sea is a great way to make fossils because something dies, it sinks to the bottom, sediment piles up on top of it, and eventually you have a beautiful fossil. Not the best day of the organism's life, but great for us. Cretaceous sea, and this was from 100 million years ago to 66 million years ago, roughly, plus or minus. All right? And one of the fossils that was found in Kansas, you know they found the mosasaurs, but one that they found by a guy named Benjamin Franklin Mudge was a bird fossil, a really remarkable bird fossil. Benjamin Mudge, he just dug stuff up. He didn't do any of the science behind it. He dug stuff up and he sent it to a guy named Charles Marsh who worked at Yale. And Marsh would do the hard work of describing it for science and publishing. So he got to name this bird, and he called it Ichthyornis, which means ichthy is fish, ornis, ornithology, birds. Not because it probably ate fish, which it probably did, but because the backbone, the vertebrae, are shaped more like reptile and fish vertebrae than like bird vertebrae. So he thought this was another transitional fossil kind of between the reptiles and the birds. But honestly, this was basically a seagull. And we don't have seagulls, we have gulls. But it was a gull-sized bird that flew around with a lot of teeth. And this dated from 80 to 90 million years ago. So if you think back to this Cretaceous period before the asteroid, you've got birds. Okay, they have teeth. We got birds with teeth, right? But they're birds. For sure they're birds. They're flying. We've got pteranodons, pterodactyls. They're flying around. And then we've got theropods and some other dinosaurs. All of them coexisting happily in ecosystems the same way that we now have our mammals and birds and reptiles that exist in our ecosystem. I don't know that people realize that birds go back that far. And yet, even with Ichthyornis, there still was not the understanding that birds descended from reptiles. Until the 1970s, kind of the seminal work in bird evolution came from Gerhard Heidelmann, a Danish paleontologist who wrote in 1926 this book, The Origin of Birds. And his argument, he knew that Archaeopteryx and Ichthyornis, okay, they are early birds. For sure there were early birds. But he believed that the birds split off from that reptile tree before the dinosaurs. He said that the fact that so many of those bones line up and look the same is actually a factor of convergent evolution. And convergent evolution means the same trait pops up in different lineages, even though they're not related. So humans have an opposable thumb. What other animal has an opposable thumb? Which one?
Chimpanzee?
No, well, chimpanzees are primates, right? So that is definitely in our lineage. Panda bears, did you know they have an opposable thumb and they can strip the bamboo straight off? Yeah. So if you're only looking at that trait, maybe we're related, right? But we're not. Okay, I'll give you an easier one. Give me 3 animals that evolved wings.
Insects.
Insects. Birds. Bats. Do you think they evolved from each other? No way, right?
Are bats not birds?
Bats are not birds, bats are mammals.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, bats are mammals, birds are birds, and insects are insects. And they did not evolve from each other. But their lineages each had the same problem, which was, how do I escape from predators? How do I sneak up on prey? If I evolve wings, then I have an evolutionary advantage. That gets passed down, passed down, passed down. So that's what he said. He said, you know, I'm looking at all these bones, but I think it's just convergent evolution because we're talking about hundreds of millions of years in which that absolutely could have evolved parallel to solve the same environmental problems. So that was his argument, and he was really stuck on this wishbone thing. He really believed that since birds have wishbones, and the earlier basal archosaurs, they have like a girdle, some sort of thing that looks like it could have evolved into a wishbone. That had to be the connection. Whereas the theropods, they have like wimpy little things that don't really look like they could evolve into wishbones. And Heilman was definitely believed that you couldn't evolve backwards. So if the theropods unevolved this clavicle girdle thing, then it's not possible that the birds would have evolved it again. Those were his arguments. And here's his idea. His idea was, you got the early reptiles, you got the archosaurs, they split off the crocodilians, they split off the birds, and they split off the dinosaurs. And this whole bird thing coming from dinosaurs was not accurate. That was his, and that's what you learned, I'm sure, when you went to grad school in the 70s and the 80s, that was what they taught you. All right, but things started to change. And so we've got these bones. We've got a guy named Ostrom and Baker who described a dinosaur called Deinonychus, found in Montana. In the 60s, a lot of dinosaurs were found in Montana, and as you find more dinosaurs, you can put more puzzle pieces together. And they looked at the arms, they looked at the hands, and gosh, it looks a lot like that Archaeopteryx. Three fingers, right? So that they might be related. But more than that, he said, look at this dinosaur. I found all these bones. This dinosaur clearly was upright. This dinosaur was clearly running around and had a lot of energy to expend on hunting and on its lifestyle. So that doesn't happen if you are cold-blooded ectothermic. That only happens if you are endothermic. So he's arguing for the first time that at least the theropods, okay, we don't know about Stegosaurus, so at least right there, where the theropods had some endothermic, were likely endothermic. And so he used the upright posture as one. Also, he looked at the bones and they had little tunnels for blood vessels. That's a thing that warm-blooded animals have and cold-blooded don't. The predator-to-prey ratio of what was found in the area of the fossils, there were a whole bunch of little, prehistoric prey herbivore things, and not that many of these theropods. So that would be required because the theropod would need to eat a lot. He also argued, they're finding these in Saskatchewan, they're finding these in northern Russia, they're finding these in cold places. And if it were a cold-blooded, it wouldn't be living in cold places, even though it was a long time ago, but it was still cold. And then he came to the conclusion they were endothermic. This was a big deal. Nobody had thought of that before. Nobody had said that before. But at the same time, he's looking at many bones, and he's focusing on this semi-lunate carpal. And now what we're looking at right now is his dinosaur that he found and Archaeopteryx, and comparing how the bones line up. The bones line up pretty well. Backward pubic bone, three-toed feet, we saw that on the previous slide, and this bone called a semi-lunate carpal, which is how the wrist rotates to make a bird able to fly. So it's seen that the theropods, they weren't flying, but they had that bone. All right, so that was the 1970s. 1986, a guy called Jacques Gauthier, he sounds very confident, and indeed he was. He did a study called, used a technique called cladistics. And cladistics is basically a great big Excel spreadsheet. You have that in your mind, an Excel spreadsheet. Across the top is every fossil that has been studied, what that fossil is, and by the time at which it's been dated to, all the fossils, right? On the left-hand side of your Excel, you've got all the traits. 5 fingers, 4 fingers, 3 fingers, all of the traits lined up. And then they go and they put a yes, it has it, or no, it doesn't have it, to try and trace the evolution of the traits. Following the traits appearance, they can see which dinosaurs go back farther and which dinosaurs are more recent. So he's looking at, you've got 4 digits in your hands for these dinosaurs, and then you lock it. This one has 5, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's up there, little 5th digit. So it lost that. There's a trait, right? Then it lost the 4th, the hollow bones. Which dinosaurs fossils have hollow bones? Which ones have a wishbone? Now he's saying that these theropods, that's basically a wishbone, that little thing that could have evolved into a wishbone. He's fine with that. The loss of the 4th digit, the pubic bone that's backwards, he's lining this all up. He did not know about the feathers. The feathers hadn't been discovered yet, so we're not looking at them yet. But he's looking at that semi-lunate carpal, and he's looking at other things, other traits, an ulna longer than a femur. All to come up with the fact that the birds nest perfectly in the dinosaur family. He studied how many traits? He did, oh, that was later. Yeah, he's saying that cladistics show that the birds nest perfectly into the dinosaur family, so they must be dinosaurs. And he was so sure of it, he came out with this paper that says birds are as much dinosaurs as humans are mammals. Like, this guy was very confident. The hypothesis that birds are dinosaurs is now supported by such a massive amount of data, his data, that it can be considered a fact of nature. Okay, but this is an Excel spreadsheet, right? Excel spreadsheets don't prove anything. There's a little bit of subjectivity in what you include on those traits. I guess he tried to include everything, but you can't include everything. And as we pointed out, like if it's a human and a panda, they're both going to get a check on that cladistics trait. So it doesn't account for convergent evolution. In any way, there's no way for cladistics to look at convergent evolution because it's only looking at observable traits, things it can see and check off. So some people were like, okay, I think that's interesting, but it still could be convergent evolution. And that set up 20 years of disagreement. The bones, the metabolism, the cladistics, all of that is supporting that the birds are dinosaurs. The more bones they find, the more it seems like, yeah, these are actually birds, are actually dinosaurs. But they still had this problem of feathers. There'd only been the Archaeopteryx, right? And that is clearly more of a bird. We don't have anything in between. No dinosaurs had any feathers. And the feather can't just pop up out of nothing, right? So that was the thinking. The thinking was there could still definitely be a separate lineage because of these feathers, that a reptile somewhere back a long time ago, the scales grew longer and longer and turned into feathers rather than the theropods turned into feathers. But that was until in 1990 in China, an archaeological site was discovered that's like the Pompeii of dinosaur daily life. 125 million years ago, there were multiple volcanic eruptions, millions of years apart, but enough that there are thousands of beautifully preserved dinosaur fossils, and many of these are species of non-avian dinosaurs, okay? This is an artist's rendition. It's probably a little exaggerated, but you get the picture. There were a lot of species of dinosaurs found that had feathers and did not fly. So now these feathers, they show up in the fossils. You can actually see them. And they might not look like the feathers that we know today, but they're like hollow tubes. They're definitely visible. You can actually use an electron microscope to see the shape of the melana something or other that'll tell you what color they were. Like, it's amazing, the stuff you can figure out. And the artists have gone to town with these feathered dinosaurs, I gotta say, because it's just so hard for me to imagine that the dinosaurs had feathers. And this means that feathers evolved before flight. So what were they for if they weren't for flight? One dinosaur, one of the earliest dinosaurs that they've found that has feathers is this Eutyrannus, 125 million years ago. And he doesn't have feathers like an eagle has feathers, but he's got little hollow tubes all over. These fossils have been found in northern areas, in colder areas, so the idea that the hypothesis is that this would have helped with insulation, keeping these possibly warm-blooded dinosaurs warm. And here's just a timeline. We could do a whole presentation on feather evolution, but here's a timeline. The earliest fossils show little hollow tubes. The more recent, they come out as barbs, the barbules. And this is a picture of a 99 million year old piece of amber that has a dinosaur feather embedded in it. You can definitely, it's not a jump to look at that and think, okay, that evolved into a feather. And so then you've got the feathers, and then finally the asymmetrical is what modern birds need to create lift and to fly. Okay, so we've got the feathers arose maybe for insulation. There's also these birds, and they're definitely birds. They're early birds, Confucius ornans. And at this Pompeii site, there were more than 1,000 of these found. Some of them have long, skinny tail feathers, and some of them don't. There was a thought, I mean, immediately you think, oh, okay, why? What do you think that is?
Male and female.
Male and female, right? Because we see these birds of paradise, right? With the long male will have the long, and the females are kind of drab and camouflage better so that they live longer. So this bird, that was what they thought. They thought, okay, that's the male and these are the females, and it was probably for display. But they couldn't prove that until recently. So they've got 1,000 species, 1,000 fossils of this, and they've spread it out to all over the world, and people are studying it. They've split the bones into little tiny microscopic slides and looked at them. And in some of the bones, they find something called medullary bone. And medullary bone is only found, it's kind of a temporary type of bone that's only found in birds, female birds, and some female dinosaurs. It rises temporarily when they are ovulating. It lets the body take more calcium out of the food. It can process the calcium 15 times faster than regular bone to make an eggshell. So some of the slides had that medullary bone, and when they checked back, yep, those were the ones that did not have the long tail feathers. So there's a little bit of more certainty now that at least the males had the long tail feathers and the females didn't. We don't have certainty of the behavior or mating dance or anything like that, but it's not hard to imagine. It's kind of a behavioral fossil, kind of. This is definitely a behavioral fossil from the place in China, the Pompeii. A dinosaur was sleeping, and this theropod, so when theropods sleep, they turn their heads around and put them under their wings, just like swans and just like the birds of today. So you see that, and you're like, yeah, maybe birds are dinosaurs. And then there was another one, a different site in China, but still in China, still another volcano. And this was a oviraptor sitting on a nest. And they got, it preserved both the bird and the eggs. And the eggs, at least seven of those eggs were very close to hatching. The embryos were fully developed. So that's kind of proof that dinosaurs sat on their eggs. It's not like turtles where they just, leave the eggs and go off about their life and hope for the best for the kids. No, they did. They sat on these eggs. And there are many of these nests that have been found where they're sitting on these eggs. So we've got behavior. Even the behavior is looking like birds. As these differences are being erased, the paleontologists are all on board. Like, yep, paleontologists in the Nova show, the paleontologist said, well, paleontologists knew a long time ago that dinosaurs are birds, which is great for paleontologists. But if you were to talk to ornithologists and ornithological paleontologists, they're not quite as sure. And yet we still have literally every day, we've got new scientific techniques coming in that are giving us more and more information, helping us fill the puzzle pieces. One of which is this fossil, which is 67 million years old. Actually, it's 67 million and 18 years old because it was collected and put in a closet and sat there for 18 years before anyone looked at it twice. Because it doesn't look very exciting, right? But these days, you can look at these fossils that don't look very exciting with a CT scan. And when they looked with a CT scan, they found the oldest complete bird head skull that is known from 67 million years ago. No teeth, lots of bones and nasal cavities and things that match up to our modern birds. So this lets you know that modern birds, not just those weird birds with the teeth, but modern birds were flying around 67 million years ago. 67 million years ago. Another technique that they use is called the molecular clock. And I had a 10-page little, I was going to read this because it's complicated, but here we go. The molecular clock says that DNA has mutations occur at a relatively constant rate over time. So you can use it like a clock to see how long it's been since a change occurred, how many mutations ago this happened. So they can look at the fossils and they can say, okay, this one has 3 fingers, this one has 4 fingers, this one has 5 fingers. They're that far apart. Mutations that cause that take this long. And they can use it for DNA, but we don't have DNA from dinosaurs. But we do have collagen, which is a protein. And proteins, DNA is the template for RNA, which is the template for proteins. So we can reverse engineer this collagen and compare collagen from a T-Rex to collagen from, and he looked at mammals and birds and reptiles and different crocodiles, all different animals, and they determined that the closest relative to the T-Rex, according to this molecular clock, is a bird. The T-Rex are more closely related to birds than to reptiles. So that was pretty cool. And then you can also go the other direction. So you know that there's a human genome project, right? Where we've got the whole entire, There's an avian genome project because birds are cool. And in 2014, they took the information from 17 different groups of birds, and they took the current DNA and they traced back to see how long ago they would have had a common ancestor with all these different mutations that they have. When was the first common ancestor? And they came up with that the first modern bird would have been 90 million years ago. And they repeated it in 2024 with 300 more different types of birds, and still came up with 90 million years ago. Now our oldest little wonder chicken is 67 million years ago. Birds, if you've got hollow bones, you're not going to be great at making fossils. There are a lot of missing fossils out there. But the science is saying 90 million years ago was the first modern bird. Okay, and I've got one more really cool thing. So circumstantially, we are saying that dinosaurs, that theropods are endotherms, that they're warm-blooded, right? But all of our evidence is circumstantial. Their posture, they're found in cold areas, all of it is circumstantial. But now they can do something called clumped isotope paleothermometry, which won't even fit on a Scrabble board. What it means is they can use, I don't even know what they use, it's crazy, but they can look on a molecular level at how the calcium atoms and the oxygen atoms and the carbon atoms, how they all lined up in the eggshell. And from that they can know the temperature at which that eggshell formed. So they can tell you that the eggshell formed at a higher temperature than the surrounding area. So that's the first actual proof that theropods were probably endotherms. And these are scientists, right? So they don't just stop at that. They actually found some invertebrate eggs with calcium from the same period and looked at that, and that the clumped isotope paleothermometry said it did not. It formed at the same temperature as the atmosphere. So with all of this, we can say, hooray! Everyone lived happily ever after. Birds are dinosaurs. I can say that. Sir David Attenborough can say that. Neil deGrasse Tyson can say that. Yes, great. My 8-year-old nephew can say the birds are dinosaurs, right? Maybe. Maybe, because it's science, right? If you are Alan Fiducia, very well-respected avian paleontologist or paleo-ornithologist, I don't know which term he prefers, he's not convinced. He's not convinced, and he has 4 reasons of why he is not convinced, but I'm going to try and read. One of the biggest is, okay, so his first argument is paleontology has become more of a doctrine than a science. Everything they find now, they fit in to where it already fit. They're not examining new finds analytically enough, is his argument. They're just not looking at it analytically enough because it fits nicely into what they've all said, and so they go forward with their contentions. Also, he says that there's still been nothing that can disprove that this was all convergent evolution. because you've got millions and millions of years. So he says that it can't be disproven. And now the one that I am most interested in, and oh, like, goodness, this is great, is I don't know if any of you learned ontogeny recapitulates phylogeny. It's like this biological thing that I learned in school and can't forget and have nightmares about still. But it means that the way an embryo develops is reminiscent of the way a lineage develops. So, like, we have baby humans in our stomachs and they look like little fish, right? And then they look like little reptiles, and then they look like little birds, and then they look like mammals, right? So what he's saying is they've now got these eggs, these dinosaur eggs with developed embryos, different levels of developing embryos, and we've got lots of bird eggs to watch how the embryos develop. So they all have 3 fingers. That they could see. That's one of their big things, is they must be related. They all have 3 fingers. But for the theropods, it's the first, second, and third fingers that develop and grow long, and the bird embryos develop the second, third, and fourth embryo fingers that grow long. So he's saying it is very unlikely that all of a sudden the dinosaurs suddenly started developing different fingers in their embryology. So that is one of a biological improbability, he says. And then his explanation for all of the feathered non-avian dinosaurs, he argues that they were actually birds who are kind of unevolved, secondarily flightless birds. That they lost the ability to fly because they didn't need it. And we have lots of birds that lost the ability to fly in New Zealand, and it wasn't even millions of years, right? They didn't need it, they didn't have predators, so they lost the ability to fly. So for him, this is not possible. It is not possible that dinosaurs evolved, that birds are dinosaurs. So I guess I'm just going to say, watch this space, because maybe in 40 years, we can come back together and we can have a talk on how birds became dinosaurs and unbecame dinosaurs. And my sources were the Nova. Also, thank you to Dr. George for looking at my slide to make sure there wasn't anything totally out of date. Thank you to ChatGPT. If you haven't used it, it's amazing. I'm finding it very useful. And I have made a deal that if anyone has any questions, Dr. George will answer them. Thank you. Yes, Bird.
Megan, I was going to ask you about the flightless birds, that is ostriches, emus, kiwis, etc. And you answered my question about how do we know that they actually did fly at one time. But I do have a question about penguins.
Penguins.
How do we know that penguins are birds? Do they have proto-feathers, the term that you use?
I am going to let Andy answer anything about penguins.
No, penguin feathers they're feathers. They're just as advanced as any other bird's feathers, but they've become more, they've changed over time. They're
They're dense.
Yeah.
They're dense.
So, have you seen penguin feather?
No, I've never handled a penguin or anything.
So, is it possible to see penguin feathers?
Yeah,
So
they have down too. The chicks are born with down.
Okay.
The penguin chicks, the down that keeps them warm, and then they grow these feathers outside that are streamlined so they can swim.
Okay.
Yeah, they have feathers. I do wonder, what's their nearest relative that flew? We haven't found that fossil yet. But as global warming happens, you know how many fossils we're going to find in Antarctica? It's going to be fantastic.
Oh, okay. I'm glad you can be optimistic about that.
Oh, boy, I can't wait.
I know. Okay.
Hey, yeah, I followed most of that. Right in the beginning, you had a slide that showed these different birds, dinosaurs, whatever, and that broke off from a common ancestor.
Yes.
Now, what caused them to break off?
A mutation. I know this one, don't I, Andy? It's a mutation, right? So there's some mutation that gives you some evolutionary advantage, and it gets passed down. And you have that mutation, so you do better than the surrounding that didn't get that mutation, and that's how species evolve. speciation, and there's different models for it, but it's mutations. Does that help?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
There was another question, I can't think of what it is now. Maybe I will.
I knew that one though. Doing great.
It was passed on.
Right, it was a mutation that gave an evolutionary advantage, so it was passed on to future generations. Yeah, because if it's a mutation, most mutations you just die. You just die. Ask the pigeon breeder. Most mutations are negative, but once in a while there's a mutation and that makes the pigeon breeders want more of it, even if the pigeon doesn't like it. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, dogs, right? It's not really an evolutionary advantage, except they're cute, so we like them, so we take care of them, so that gets passed down. Yeah.
I don't want to break this off, but this is tricky. Soft tissue doesn't fossilize very well.
Soft tissue doesn't fossilize very well.
Done some research here. Did you get into any research that says anything about the respirations of birds versus, we breathe in and out,
There was something about theropods also have this airway system.
If they can answer that one, they can come up with a big one.
Well, the theropods have the same, they think the theropods have the same airway system as the bird, where it goes through, right, Andy?
That's right. So that used to be an argument that birds were unique, because birds have a circular respiratory system. It's very efficient. There's no dead air like ours.
Yes, it's true.
And they thought, so that was thought to be an adaptation for flight, but now we know that was widespread in dinosaurs, and it was an adaptation for being big and having efficient
I think
respiration.
that they had true respiration.
Yeah, they
Even the
did.
big ones, even
I've
sauropods.
never
Oh.
run into that anywhere, but that's a big one. That's a big one, yeah.
Yeah. There've been a lot of watershed moments I didn't include, but I tried to hit the big ones. Yes.
Silly language professor has a silly question for you, man.
Si,
How does a
senor.
wonder chicken gives names?
Oh, I have no idea. They called it Aster ornis because actually if you watch this Nova documentary, that is the bird that they think survived the asteroid. Because it didn't have the teeth, so it was probably omnivorous, which means it could eat kind of anything. And somehow it just could get away from the problems that the asteroid created. So I don't know, Aster ornis, wonder chicken, They have to brand it so that the public like me will care. Yes.
Megan, have you heard of the Israeli historian Yuval Noah Harari?
I've heard of him.
He has a book called Homo Sapiens.
Mhm.
It's about the evolution of mankind. And in reading his chapters on the hunter-gatherers, he talks about the fact that hunter-gatherers killed off a lot of the mega species.
That's one theory.
Yeah, and so I'm just thinking about all of these large flightless birds. They seem to be in the southern hemisphere and in perhaps the most remote areas for human habitation.
Well, they tend to be on islands.
Yes.
Many of the birds that lost the ability to fly were on islands because there were no predators.
Yes, and you all know Harari's thesis is that because those were the last areas that hunter-gatherers migrated to, then those mega species survived longer.
Mm-hmm.
Would you care to comment
Oh,
on
we
that
could
or
probably
to
do a whole-
refer us
We
to?
could probably do a whole presentation on moas and other huge birds from that period and the dodo and things like that.
Yeah.
But I don't, like,
The dodo bird, yeah.
yeah, the dodo. But I don't know how that ties into the dinosaurs, except that they fit right into all of the science. They fit right in.
Well, I'm just intrigued by the fact that other than the the examples that you gave of those in China, but those were, those were the reptile, the evidence that those did exist there. But
Yeah.
today, the only examples that I know of that we have of these large flightless birds are in the southern hemisphere, and particularly in Southeast
Yeah,
Asia.
do we have any large
No,
flightless
no,
birds?
well, yeah, so the big ones that you're talking about are called the rhea, there's rheas and ratites and emus and ostriches and cassowaries and things like that. Those all live in the southern hemisphere, but all of those birds descended from flighted birds. So that was secondary for one thing. And that it gets beyond what we can talk about here, but they were also all they were all joined together. At one point, Australia and Antarctica and several land masses were joined, and all of those birds kind of radiated from there. But that's a different time period than a lot of what this is happening. Now, there are flightless birds, as Megan said, all over the world that have evolved more recently on islands.
But that's
There's cormorants and ducks and there's all kinds of things that are smaller. I don't know if that answers your
Okay,
question.
guys. Well, thank you very much.
Well, thank you.
And I hope I see